Thank you so much. You guys are so fun. And remember to hit up that bar because my jokes get funnier the more you buy from our friendly bartender. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. As Corey said, we met through this really cool collaboration between Florida Humanities and the Smithsonian. Anything with the Smithsonian in it just sounds so fancy. And it really is. This is going to be really cool. So I actually developed this talk for the project directors, including Corey, who are putting together these exhibitions that are all about food, because there are so many ways you could tell the story of a place or of a person. But food is a fantastic vehicle because we all eat, right? And so we were thinking about it from the lens of putting together a museum exhibition. And then I thought, well, what if somebody wanted to tell their personal story through food? Raise your hand if you've ever maybe thought about writing your memoirs, your autobiography, maybe putting together a family cookbook. You know, the holidays are coming up. Anything like that, anything to do with preserving history, food can be a really good lens. So we're gonna spend some time together thinking about Florida sort of as a character and also reflecting on our own food journeys and what they tell about our story. Okay, so this is me. This is the name of the talk. We're already doing it. We've already begun. We're already talking about the food, and she's already given you all the cred. Gravy is the magazine of the Southern Foodways Alliance, in case you're interested. I think you need a subscription. But yeah, these are some of the things I've done. It's a mix of food journalism and food journalism. And so that's kind of the lens. We're going to talk about Florida's food history, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use some journalistic techniques that I use in my work every day to tell your own food story. Okay, who in here is from Key West? What, three people, okay. Anybody from up north? I guess you're all from up north, right? Okay, any Ohio? Am I the only Ohio person? Okay, yeah. There you go, you're my people, you're my people. So in 2005, I got a job at the Tampa Bay Times, and when you're a girl from Cleveland, all you want to do is go to Florida. So I packed up my little red Honda Civic, and my friend Amy and I drove from Cleveland. We stopped in Alabama to stay with her family for a night, and then we drove all the way down to St. Petersburg. And by the time we got out of the car, you know when you go on a road trip, and the weather changes every time you get out of the car, like at a gas station or something, it gets a little warmer, a little more humid. So by the time we got to Florida, I was like, that's it. I'm gonna save so much money because I never have to eat again. It's too hot to eat, and I'm just gonna have smoothies. And for the first month or so, I really pretty much lived off of smoothies, and it was so refreshing. But then I realized, Dalia, you're missing out on a lot. Like, Florida has a lot to offer, and it's not just key lime pie, which I wouldn't mind if it was just key lime pie. But so we're going to talk about what some of those things are. And I know you already know. And so this is, you know, she said I have a master's degree in education, so I'm going to be expecting some class participation tonight, okay? We're going to talk briefly, like a flyover of Florida's past, present, and future. So I want to start by asking you, and this is one of those class participation things, so you can start thinking about your answer. What did you eat for school lunch as a child? And the reason I want to ask that is because a lot of times when we think about things that are worth capturing, memories that are worth taking a photo of or noting in our journal, it's like the special things, like your wedding or the birth of a child or, you know, Thanksgiving or something like that. But if you think about Thanksgiving dinner, let's say, that's not how most of us eat every day. If you think about a wedding, most of us are not eating like a 3 or 4 tiered cake on the regular, you know what I mean? But we can learn a lot about what people eat just every day, you know? And so when we think about the people in Florida's past, I think the most we can glean is by thinking about what they ate every day, and that's true for you and me as well. So I'm gonna stall for time a little bit by telling you a little bit about some people in my life and what they ate, and then I just wanna know from all of you, not all of you, maybe like 3 of you, what you ate. So for example, my mom was born in 1951. She grew up in Philadelphia, and she walked home for lunch. Did anybody walk home for school lunch? And keep your hand up if you actually walked back to school after going home. Amazing. I don't know if that would happen today. But yeah, my grandma was a stay-at-home mom, and she had lunch ready, soup and whatever, on the table for the kids, and then they would walk back. My husband is one of 4 kids. His family was on public assistance. His mom was a single mom, housekeeper at Disney, and he ate the free and reduced school lunch. So for him, it was like Sloppy Joe or things like that. And that tells me about his economic situation. It tells me about, the time period that he was growing up in. You can learn a lot. And you think about school lunch. You eat that lunch thousands of times, you know what I mean, over the years. And so it really does give us an indication of sort of what your life was like. So maybe from a couple of you, what did you eat for school lunch, and what do you think it tells us about you? Peanut butter and jelly. Okay, that seems basic. Yes, round of applause for peanut butter and jelly. That seems basic, but that's a very American lunch. So that already tells me that you grew up here. You probably weren't eating that in Australia. It would have been like a Vegemite sandwich or something. Anybody else? Fish sticks on Friday. Catholic school? No? Just loving fish sticks, loving life. The square pizza. It's still square, by the way, because I have a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old. The pizza has not changed, by the way. Anybody else? Bologna. Hot or cold? Cold with the little string that you have to... Oh, man. Okay, yeah. These are all very like American 20th century type lunches. Okay, and we can also learn a lot from the regular repeat meals that the people in Florida's past ate, and I'm talking way, way back. Okay, so we're gonna go all the way back to the indigenous people of Florida, like 12,000 plus years ago. I live in Tampa, which is like Tocobaga territory, and then we can see some of the other indigenous people that lived throughout the state, which wasn't even a state then. But okay, their big 3, their pizza, bologna, and PB&J was squash, corn, and beans. Has anyone ever heard it called the 3 Sisters? You're getting, I love this like power fist pump for the squash, corn, and beans. Yeah, that's right. In Maryland, yes. It grows very well together. They complement each other in the way that they grow, and it provides all the macronutrients that you would need. And in Mexico, even today, they call it the 3 Sisters, and you'll find paintings of it and things like that. And they were very creative. Like what we think of as squash, they call calabaza, which in Spanish means pumpkin. And they would even dry it out and use it as a sweetener. Because if you think about it, before the Europeans came, what are you gonna put in your Starbucks if there's no sugar yet, right? You have to have something sweet, and so they would use it as a sweetener. And so if we were maybe making a museum of indigenous food cultures in Florida, and I bet this is a part of your presentation and in your exhibition, we would definitely include squash, corn, and beans. So when you're telling your story, maybe maybe the holidays, you're coming up to the holidays and you want your grandchildren to interview you about what you ate as a kid. It's great to talk about the things you ate, the wedding cake that you had and the Thanksgiving turkey, but it's just as important to talk about the peanut butter and jelly, the bologna, and the square pizza, because that's your squash, corn, and beans. Like, those are the things that years from now people are going to remember about this time. Okay, but eating habits change, and people in Florida are not only eating squash, corn, and beans. And I bet in your life, your eating habits have changed as well. So we talked about the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook, available for purchase in the lobby. Thank you so much. And why did I become a vegetarian? It's because I watched a documentary. Don't ever watch a documentary unless you're willing to make some changes in your life. I watched a documentary about meat that was over a decade ago, and I went cold turkey, no pun intended. But my husband was recently watching a documentary about chocolate, and I just walked by like this. Because I love my chocolate. What I don't know can't hurt me. But for me, that was a time when my eating habits changed, was becoming a vegetarian. I'll give you another example. I've got my water bottle down here, and it's always filled with room temperature water. I used to love ice water, but in college, I was an exchange student in Ecuador in South America, and cold water was more expensive at the store. And I was like, I can't afford cold water. Who am I, Bill Gates? So I just started drinking room temp water, and I never went back. And it was a financial reason that caused that shift. So I want to know from you, when is the time when your eating habits shifted, and what caused that shift? Going to college? Okay, what happened when you went to college? You had to eat what they served in the dining hall. So, is there something you started eating or stopped eating because it was available in the dining hall?
First time I ever ate artichokes.
Artichokes! That's so interesting. And you know, dining halls today have like 500 choices at every meal, which is wild. Okay, and do you still like artichokes? Oh, nice. Okay. I started eating oatmeal in college because it was cheap, and I eat oatmeal every day. Anybody else? When did your eating habits change?
They changed dramatically when I moved overseas when I was young to Southeast Asia.
You moved to Southeast Asia. Okay, so maybe like less dairy, that kind of thing, more fish. Everything changed. And did it revert when you came back to the States? Or do you keep any of those habits? It stuck. I love that. Okay, we had somebody over here? Yeah. When you moved out of the house. Okay, so what changed? Oh! Yes! Okay, no shade. I feel like we're throwing all our moms under the bus. But do you feel like there are certain foods that you thought you didn't like, and then you realized, oh, I just didn't like the way they were prepared in my house? Yeah. Like I started roasting vegetables, and my mom's a great cook, but I was like, maybe we don't have to boil everything to death. Maybe we can roast some things or eat them raw. Yeah, that's so interesting. And for other people, maybe it's a health scare. Maybe your doctor tells you you need to stop eating so much of something, that kind of thing. But our individual eating habits changed, and then collectively, as a society, our eating habits change. And usually when that happens, it's not just because you woke up and decided I want to eat artichokes. It's because there was like a life event that caused that change. And that's also true for the people of Florida. So one of those big life events for all of us in Florida was in 1513 when Ponce de Leon landed in what is now St. Augustine, because now we have the Spanish introducing things like pork. Do you guys have wild pigs here? Maybe you don't have them here. You guys have somebody said yes. We have a ton in Tampa Bay. Like at night, I have to have my brights on and drive slowly because there will be like a mother and her piglets crossing the street. You know what I mean? And that's all because of the Spanish, because, okay, we want a food source that will reproduce quickly, so they brought pigs. Citrus, right? They brought the oranges and lemons and limes in the water to help prevent scurvy, which is caused by a vitamin C deficiency. They didn't drink water. No one was drinking regular water unless it had citrus in it. Otherwise, they just drink wine, and that includes kids, which is wild. Garlic, thank God for that, olive oil, right, and of course wine. So now we're going from squash, corn, and beans to more foods being introduced into Florida, and of course with them they also brought eventually enslaved Africans, which could be a whole other talk, but they had their own foodways, right? So a lot of them were brought here because they were experts in cultivating rice, especially in like South Carolina and Georgia. They were great with, yams. They introduced barbecue and things that we think of as Florida foods. A lot of those come from West Africa, like watermelon and barbecue and gumbo and things like that. So now we've got 3 different groups of people all coming together. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to introduce that clip. I know you're like, what the heck is that? Okay, my kids are not here, so they don't know that I'm showing you this. But they're now 13 and 9, and in this video, they're like 5-1 or 4-0, something like that. But does anybody here have kids? Okay, grandkids, nieces and nephews. Have you ever fed baby food to a baby? It is a mess. It is a 10 out of 10 mess because it's so easy to drink out of a bottle. Even when you go from like nursing to a bottle, they don't want to do that. Then they don't want to go from the bottle to the sippy cup because that's more work. Every time you make a change, it's more work. Like when you started cooking the vegetables for yourself and trying to figure out how you like them, there's like that learning curve in the beginning and you kind of just want to stick with what's easy, but you know there's something good on the other side of it. So this is a video from, gosh, probably almost 9 years ago of my son Benji finally eating solid foods, and then my daughter Nora's cheering him on.
I'm so proud of you.
Do it again, buddy. Do it again.
Yes.
He's eating, what is he eating? I think oatmeal maybe?
Yes.
Okay, so you get the idea. But it's a lot of work. This is what he looks like when he's done eating solid foods. He's Mr. Messy. And now I'm happy to say he's 9 and he's great with a spoon. But it's a lot of work to incorporate a new way of eating into your life. Because eating, like we said, it's something we do on repeat. And so when we make a change, our brains are wired for routine, you know? And so even people coming together, and it's interesting because even today in Florida, just walking down Duval Street this afternoon, there are people from everywhere. Florida, it's like Times Square all the time, you know what I mean? But that's really cool because everybody's bringing their foodways with them. So we talked about when your eating habits changed, and maybe it was a financial thing, or maybe it was your doctor told you stop eating so much beef or whatever it was. But then one of our colleagues at the Smithsonian coined a really interesting term. He called it your palate perspective. So it's not just like what you eat, but it's why you eat it and how you think about it. So like when you said you moved to South Asia, and your whole mindset kind of shifted. So has that ever happened to anyone? Not necessarily being forced, but maybe gradually. Like I'll give you an example. My best friend Ashley, we've been best friends since we were 3, and she's Jewish. And when we would go to her house, it was a whole other culture, you know what I mean? And some of those things, like I'm the person making matzo ball soup, even though I'm not Jewish, because I just thought, wow, this is really cool. I like this tradition. I like these rituals. So has anything like that ever happened to you? Yes.
I went from the military to work into a Cirque du Soleil show, and when we would go to like somebody's birthday, you always make the dish your mom taught you, right? Well, there were 18 different countries represented in it, so it was like eating from all around the world. So I learned a lot from them by their food.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, meeting people from different countries. I had a friend whose parents were from India, and when we would go to her house, it always smelled amazing. It always smelled like Indian food. And the parents would order pizza for us kids in the basement, and we would go upstairs and get the Indian food because we're like, that smells really good. And now I love Indian food. But yeah, just thinking about sort of those mind shifts that can happen. We talked about how there are so many different people converging in Florida, and I live in Tampa, and statistically, most of them end up on the I-4 corridor. But back in the day, most of them ended up in North Florida, these 3 different main groups. You have your indigenous people, your Europeans, and your West Africans. And so there's a historian up in Fort Mose in the St. Augustine area named Andrew Batten, and he says, Florida is the birthplace of fusion cuisine. He told me this in an interview that I did for the Zest podcast. And if you think about it, it just makes sense because this is the first time in world history that you have these 3 groups of people coming together with their, squash, corn, and beans, and greens, and okra, and all these different things. And a stew is probably the dish that best represents that. And they did eat a lot of stew with like very, very hard, crusty bread. But we don't have to get into this whole thing, but have you heard of the Underground Railroad? Enslaved people going from the south to the north to get their freedom in like the 1800s. But in the 1700s, the original Underground Railroad actually went from north to south. You already know, he's up here nodding, which seems crazy, like, guys, you're going the wrong way. But no, it was because in Florida, if you could get down here and you would pledge your loyalty to the Spanish crown and convert to Catholicism, they're just like, hey, we need people to help us like fend off everybody else so we can have Florida for ourselves and you can have your freedom. So in North Florida, in Northeast Florida, you had the first free black settlement, which was Fort Mose. You had, yes, free black people, but you also had indigenous people there and you had European people there, all living together, intermarrying, and of course, sharing their foodways. So we fast forward a little bit and now we're adding, it's almost like we're at a grocery store and we're just like putting things in our cart along the way. So we have our squash, our corn, our beans, our pork and our garlic and lots of wine and citrus. And then of course the Florida crackers, did anybody grow up with a garden in your backyard, like a kitchen garden? Anybody have a garden now? One person. Anybody grow a pot of herbs? You know what, I would encourage, okay, there we go. These are my herb people right here. I've interviewed more chefs than I can count, and a lot of them say, just grow something yourself, even if it's just like a pot of basil on your, kitchen counter. It makes such a big difference in how the food tastes. And of course, the Florida crackers knew that, and they really didn't have a choice because where else are they gonna go? But they all had their kitchen garden and they all had their staples. We've interviewed the author Joy Harris on the podcast, and if she was gonna give the big five of what the Florida crackers ate, it was cane syrup, which is sugar, sweet potatoes. Anybody have a sweet potato in the past month? Anybody, oh, look at you guys getting your fiber. Anybody having sweet potatoes for Thanksgiving? Yeah, probably a lot of us. Coffee, who had coffee today? Right, okay, who had biscuits? And boiled peanuts. Did anyone actually eat boiled peanuts today? I'm curious. No. Put it on your bucket list before the end of the year. Yeah, so these are more foods that we think of as just like classic Florida or Southern foods, and we're just adding them to this great big melting pot. So then we have another one of those turning points. Okay, people are starting to eat differently again. Well, why? It's because of the two Henrys. You guys have heard of Henry Flagler and Henry Plant, right? These transportation magnates with their railroads, steamships, and hotels. In Tampa, we have what was the Tampa Bay Hotel, which is now a museum. And all the rich and famous people used to come down there and, just sun themselves and change clothes for every meal and live their best life. But what they did was they now have a way to transport food in and out of Florida. So I live in the Tampa area, which is pretty close to Plant City. And just as an example, in the late 1800s, there was a deep freeze. And all of the crops that Plant City farmers had relied on, they weren't going to work out that year. And they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I don't know, let's just plant some strawberries. Okay, who's heard of the Florida Strawberry Festival, right? So the strawberries turned out to be a smash hit. And now if you're driving on I-4 anytime in February, March, you're going to be sorry because there's going to be a very long line to get off the highway because everybody wants their strawberry shortcake. And it all started from itty bitty Plant City. It's now the winter strawberry capital of the world. So you can transport strawberries out, and you can bring new foods in. Who had an apple today? I did. Yeah. Do apples grow in Florida? Absolutely not. So now we can transport strawberries out and we can bring in things like apples. And so for the first time, the Florida crackers, they had their sweet potatoes and their coffee. Well, now for Christmas, they can have apple pie, And that's another one of those things that maybe we take for granted. Actually, they were making apple pie upstairs earlier today. Chef Martha we smelled it, we wanted some, but she wasn't budging. It was not for us, it was for the kids who baked it. But that's one of those things that you think of as like an American staple, kind of like the peanut butter and jelly. You just take it for granted, it's always been there, but it hasn't always been there. It just feels that way to us because we're living in a particular moment in this timeline. But if you zoom out and think about the bigger picture, there is something special to those foods that we think of as everyday foods, or the regular school lunch, or the apple pie, things like that. Okay, so we're gonna hop a few more years down the timeline into the present. So you're probably wondering, what the heck is she doing now? Has anyone seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or read the book Charlie and the? Oh yes, we love it. I wish I had chocolate to hand out. But sadly I don't, because apparently from the documentary you're not supposed to eat chocolate. So this is one of my favorite movies, and I did get to interview Gene Wilder, the late great Gene Wilder, for the Tampa Bay Times a long time ago. But for those of you who don't know, it's a story about this sort of mad scientist chocolatier who hosts a contest where kids have to try to get the golden ticket from the candy bars that they buy, and a handful of kids are chosen to tour his factory that's like never seen anyone in it. And one by one, the kids end up sort of self-destructing because they're just so excited and gluttonous that they can't contain themselves. So in this clip, I don't know if we have sound, but you don't even need the sound. It's a kid named Augustus who just can't resist the chocolate river.
Grandpa, look at Augustus.
Don't worry, he can't drink it all.
Augusto, sweetheart, save some room for later.
Augustus, please, don't do that. My chocolate must never be touched by human hands. Please, don't do that. Don't do that. You're contaminating my entire river. Please, I beg you, Augustus. My chocolate! My chocolate! My beautiful chocolate!
Don't just stand there, do something!
Okay, what in the world have they done? So then he ends up being filtered through the chocolate filtration system, and he ends up like blasting off into oblivion. Okay, why are we showing this clip? I don't know, you tell me. No, I'm kidding. I think a lot of us have had that experience of loving something too much, and it turned out to be our downfall. Maybe a food was really good and we just ate too much. Or maybe we gorged on it and then we got tired of it. Or we realized we were allergic to it. Or any number of things. So I want to know, has that ever happened to you? And this is a safe space. What's said in this room stays in this room. I have eaten too much of my kids' Halloween candy. I ate too much of that amazing Jamaican curry that I told you about earlier. It was probably for like 4 people, and I ate the whole thing because it was really good. Okay, here's the thing. Florida has eaten too many donuts, too many poke bowls, but for us, instead of donuts and poke bowls, it was citrus, right? Especially in like Central Florida, when times were great, we were living those donuts, we were just loving them. You know, we had the railroads, so now we can move citrus all around. You know, we have World War II, which was great for the citrus industry because they were sending orange juice concentrate overseas for the troops. Do you guys remember the orange juice? They have to stir like this. It's like an arm workout. We had that when I was a kid. Yeah, so that was developed for the troops, and it provided jobs. So, okay, we're gonna gorge on citrus here in Florida in terms of like sort of putting all our eggs in that basket. But then what happens? People aren't drinking as much juice. Raise your hand if you drank orange juice this morning with your breakfast. 2, 3 people. 4 people out of however many are in here, 50 or something. Yeah, people just, they don't necessarily want to drink their calories anymore. There are so many other options for what we can drink, right? And then have you heard of citrus greening? It's a disease that's like devastated the citrus industry. So that's a problem because the fruit is not as available as it was in Florida, so it becomes more expensive. And then people don't necessarily want to inherit their grandparents' citrus grove. And if they do inherit it, maybe they're gonna turn it into condos or something that's just less work. So what are we gonna do now, right? Because we were living high on the hog with our citrus and still, you know, with other agricultural endeavors, but we can't necessarily just rely on that. So what will the future look like? This is another turning point for, you know, future school children of America who are going to read about Florida food history. This is one of those turning points, but we don't necessarily know what the future looks like, but maybe you can help predict it based on what you're seeing. So everything starts with an individual, and then that becomes the trend for what everybody's doing. So I want to know, like, what changes are you seeing? Are you changing the way you eat because something makes you uncomfortable about where your food is coming from? Anything like that. Just you as an individual. Low carb, okay. Why is that? Just.
Well, I mean, that's the diet everybody says you should do.
Yeah, a lot of people, it's carbs. That's the thing you're gonna have to pry out of my cold, dead hands. I love carbs. Okay, you said so much. Organic foods, okay, why? Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, back in the day, they didn't have to call it organic because everything was organic. Anybody else? Yeah, I know. When you read the labels, there's sugar in everything. And I'm trying to get away from that. But you're right. If you're going to get away from that, then you have to make time to make it yourself. So there is a return. Did anybody during the pandemic sort of lean into making more things yourself? Anybody make bread? Yeah, okay, a couple of you. We started out baking. We were doing like cookies and all kinds of stuff. And then we realized, oh my gosh, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We can't just keep baking cookies every night. So then we started making dog treats and passing them out to the neighborhood dogs. So we got the satisfaction of baking, but we weren't gonna eat them. So you can just think about, as you go through your day, like what are some of the changes that I'm making? What are some of the trends that I'm seeing? And these will be in the future what everybody's doing, you know what I mean? And if you're not sure, a good question to ask yourself is, what are the younger people in my life doing? Because that's what we all eventually end up doing. So a related question, you mentioned sugar, like what are some changes that you would like to make personally? I'm trying to eat more local. So like instead of buying eggs at the grocery store, I get them from my neighbor who has chickens. Are there any other changes? A few people have already shared. Less processed, yeah. Over here?
Less red meat, more fish.
Okay, less red meat, more fish. I've interviewed a lot of chefs, as I said, and they always encourage people, eat less meat, but eat better quality meat. So more expensive, and if you need something to eat on the other days, there are lots of ideas in the Florida Vegetarian Cookbook available for purchase in the lobby. How about one more person? Any other changes you're looking to make? Yes, homemade salad dressing is a game changer, don't you think? Yeah, there are some in the book, that's just an aside, but it is so fresh, and then you can use it for so many other things. Like you could even use it as a marinade for meat on the days that you're eating meat, you know? That's a game. I would say, seriously, if you're gonna do like one thing, if you're somebody who says, I don't cook, or it's just me and I don't feel like it's worth it or whatever, a homemade vinaigrette, like if you made that on a Sunday and had it for the week, that would start you in a direction that I think you would be happy with. Okay, has anyone ever heard of the show Orange is the New Black? I think it might have been a book also. Okay, so it's about this sort of upscale woman who commits a crime and then she goes to prison. And so instead of her little black dress, she's now traded it for prison orange. So it's saying like, this thing has replaced this other thing. And I think that's what's gonna happen in Florida, because we talked about how citrus is not really where it's at anymore in terms of like leaning into it economically. So what might some of those things be? Oh, I thought I was like, there's no sound in my presentation. For example, in North Florida especially, they're starting to grow olives. Olive trees. There's even a place in Brooksville called the Olive Grove. And it's just rows and rows of olive trees. And it turns out that the infrastructure required to process olives is similar to that required for citrus. So even some of these former citrus groves are turning into olive groves. So you could say olives are the new citrus. And I wonder if you've noticed any other trends like this where people used to do one thing and now they're doing something else. Like I used to drink dairy milk, and now I drink plant-based milk. So you could say that like oat milk or pea protein milk is the new dairy milk. And the Olive Grove in Brooksville does something similar with the tastings. And I feel like it all works together, because once you have this olive oil that you've experienced, maybe you were even there when they pressed it, and then you said you went to the farmer's market and you got your fresh veggies, and maybe you talked to the farmer who grew them. Now you have like a story that goes with the food. So of course you want to go home and make your own and have fewer processed foods. And food really is about storytelling, you know, because if you think about it, you cannot copyright a recipe. You cannot copyright just a list of ingredients. But what you can copyright are the head notes, which is like the little blurb that goes at the top of the recipe, and the specific directions. It's so basically what you can copyright is your personal touch, your story. So if it's a recipe for salad dressing and it's just, you know, lemon and olive oil and honey and salt and pepper, that's great. But what's even better is it was a sunny day and we went out and picked these lemons from the backyard, and my kids came over and we made it together, that kind of thing. And so the story behind the food is really what sells it. Even when you go to a restaurant, I mean, in the menu, what are they doing? They're telling you the story of the food. The chef is coming up to your table to talk to you about the dish and why it was created. And so when we talk about telling our own stories and using food as a vehicle for that, that's where it gets super exciting. So I want to spend just our last couple of minutes talking about how to draw out some of it. I mean, you guys today, I guess we are recording this talk. You guys have given some fantastic descriptions. I mean, just listening to each other talk about, the foods you ate as a child or, as a young adult, it just, it's so vivid. And this was just kind of completely unprepared. So I just wanted to give you a few pointers for maybe if you wanted to interview a loved one about some of their food stories or have them interview you. And with the holidays coming up, this is a perfect time to do it. I've been in journalism for several decades, and these are just some tips to get people to talk. I'm the person on the airplane that the person next to me never shuts up because they want to tell me everything. And the way I do that, number one, is to just be quiet. Silence is your friend. Something I learned when I was getting my master's degree in education is what they call wait time. And it's when the teacher will ask a question and then wait for the students to answer. So I wait for you to think about what you want to say. I don't just jump in and try to fill the silence. People find silence very uncomfortable, and they will fill it if you let them. So if you ask your sister or your niece, what was your favorite holiday food memory from growing up? And she doesn't answer right away. Just let the silence linger, and she'll end up saying something really good. Another phrase I'll use is paint a picture for me. And it might even require closing your eyes. Close your eyes and tell me about the kitchen that you had as a child. What color were the chairs? Was there wallpaper? Was there paint? What did the floors look like? What did they feel like when you sat on them? You know what I mean? And then you start getting into some of those really good details that, again, when you lived in there and you lived in that kitchen, you didn't think it was a big deal. It was just normal for you. But to people hearing about it, it's really special. And another thing that helps is to talk about yourself. I told you guys I showed you pictures of my kids. I told you about my husband. I told you about my mom. And then you reciprocated by telling me about yourself. Dumb isn't really the right word, but it's always good to ask, how would you explain this to a child? Because that puts it into simple terms that everybody can understand. I think we might have some audio. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Let me introduce this audio really quick. So an example of someone who I think does this really well is the journalist Michelle Norris. She used to be on NPR, and now she has a podcast called Your Mama's Kitchen. And it's just what we were talking about. She's interviewing noteworthy people about what they ate growing up, what the kitchen was like, and she's drawing out really interesting details and funny stories from them. And so in this clip, she's talking to the comedian Conan O'Brien, and he's sharing about, I think he grew up in maybe Boston, and I don't know, check me on that. But he's talking about what he ate growing up as a household with a lot of kids.
There were times when my mom was in the hospital and she just wasn't able to do the traditional Sunday meal, because we would have a Sunday meal, and that was very important. And so my father said, I'm going to step in and do the Sunday meal because that still needs to remain. That's important. That's the time when everybody gets together. So my dad said, well, I'm a scientist and I'm really good at chemistry, so I'm just going to check out a bunch of books. My dad got a bunch of cookbooks and studied them, and then approached it like a chemist. And he went and what I remember very clearly is he learned how to make about 2 meals or 3 meals. He'd make a lot of it'd be potatoes and sweet potatoes and, some vegetables, but grilled swordfish when it was in season, grilled steak. And what he didn't do ever was clean as he went. And I think I did get that from my dad, because when he was done, it looked like there had been an explosion in the room over in the kitchen area. And we'd all finish our meal, and he'd say, well, I got to go to the lab. I'll see you suckers later. And so that was up to us to try and to try.
Well, when you have 6 kids, you know that it'll be taken care of.
Yeah,
Somebody's got kitchen duty.
Yeah, someone. And I have the bad reputation in my family among my brothers and sisters is somehow I was very good at looking like I was pitching in with everyone else, but I'd disappear pretty quickly.
It's just one of those like funny things that happened multiple times in their family. Okay, so a couple more things. Always talk to one person. Don't talk to a group when you're telling a story. And you can be talking to a group like I am, but act as if you are always talking to one person, because that's how people identify when they're listening to you, and it becomes more intimate. So my husband's name is Braulio. I might just go home and tell him, hey, Braulio, I met this really cool group of people today. We were in a former church, and it was the coolest thing ever. You know, I'm not being fancy with my words. I'm just sort of talking to him the way I would talk to anyone. Always don't save the best for last. You know, start with something good, because you don't want to lose people. You want to show and not tell, and you guys are fantastic at that. I can already tell because of just the descriptions of the food you've given me. If you pose a question, you want to make sure to answer the question, which seems obvious. And then this is a great thing for you guys in Key West, because you have such an awesome literary tradition here with just so many fantastic authors. I mean, I got to meet Judy Blume earlier today. What a treat that was. But now that we've kind of talked about some of these things, maybe you'll notice as you're watching a movie or reading a book, you can sort of dissect, like, why does this grab me? Why does this particular scene make such an impact on me? That kind of thing. And it's an art, but it's also a science. And so you can sort of pick out things that people are doing that really touch you, and you can try to do some of those things too. And then as we said in the beginning, a place can be a character. You're a character in your own life. I feel like Key West has main character energy for sure. And so I would just encourage you all, maybe try telling your own story through food. It's such a fun way to think about your life and the different changes that have happened over the years. And so thank you so much for spending some time with me. This was a lot of fun, and enjoy the rest of your evening.